Crisis Radio. Now let's get back to our short overview of American labor history, what those Austrians and Chicago boys don't want you to know about how you got here. It was not the market. There never was a free market. There was an interval of between about 1835 and 1861 of pretty deregulated free trade environment, but that led to a catastrophe. It led to an economic catastrophe in the crisis, the Panic of 1837, and then it led to a civil war. Nothing worse than that. That's thank you, Andrew Jackson and Martin Van Buren, and your crackpot policies. But it's not free market, but labor struggles have gotten you where you are today. And again, you may think that you deserve to be in the middle class because of your pretty face. Unfortunately, finance capitalists don't see it that way. And from those guys, you get what you can fight for and obtain. And in the New Deal, of course, in addition to the creation of the unions, the United Auto Workers, the United Steel Workers, the Teamsters, the International Longshoremen's Association, and so forth, you get all kinds of legislation. 1935, the Social Security Act, still the main target of the reactionaries, from Sharon Angle to this new character, Joe Miller in Alaska with his 5 o'clock shadow. He looks trying to look like Nixon, I guess, on a 5 o'clock of a workday. The unemployment insurance, right, that you can have unemployment insurance so you don't become destitute and have to take the first low-wage job that somebody offers you. Old age insurance, your Social Security pension. Disability insurance, if you get hurt on the job, you can get something out of that. And welfare, unfortunately, destroyed by Clinton, the worst single thing that Clinton did. So that's all there, wages and hours, and, of course, various forms of relief and job creation programs. FERA, Federal Emergency Relief Agency, Harry Hopkins, saved a lot of people from starving in 1933 and similar years. CWA, Civil Works Administration, same thing. Harry Hopkins saved a lot of Americans from dying of hunger, which they had done publicly under Grover Cleveland, who said, no, I can't violate the free market to do anything to save them. WPA, Works Progress Administration, built half of what you see around you in the United States in terms of municipal buildings, libraries, schools, airports, roads, and so forth. PWA, Public Works Administration, Harold Ickes, this is the big Hoover Dam kind of stuff. TVA, right, Tennessee Valley Authority. Reconstruction Finance Corporation, tremendous buyer of capital goods, War Plants Corporation, Synthetic Fuels Corporation, helped to win the war. And without the logistical genius of Harry Hopkins, Lend-Lease might not have succeeded in keeping the Soviets and the British in the war. So this is all the history that a fanatic demagogue of the type of Glenn Beck, ultra-reactionary, tending towards something worse. They don't want you to know this. The post-war situation, therefore, the trade unions essentially reached their apex about 1945. 36% of all U.S. Employees, workers, are in a union in 1945. Today it's about 9%. We'll get to that in a minute. The counterattack then begins, and the beginning of the counterattack is after the fall of Hitler and Mussolini and Tojo, but before the Cold War really gets going. The reactionary Republicans elected in 1946, they take over the House of Representatives. They rammed through the Taft-Hartley Law, June 1947, passed over the veto of Harry S. Truman, too smelly even for Truman, a Wall Street Democrat. And this is that there is no such thing as a closed shop, and labor leaders have to swear that they're not communists. Well, how about having the bosses swear that they're not Nazis or fascists? No, no, no. The opprobrium, the onus goes on the labor union. You've got to swear you're not a communist. And this allows the creation of the right-to-work states. In other words, states can decide that the union shop is illegal, and therefore it's possible to create a union, but it's much harder. This perpetuates this division between the northern states, where the Homestead Act had essentially created a land reform for everybody who wanted it. The South never got that because Thaddeus Stevens didn't have enough support in the land reform that he wanted to do. And therefore, now we've got the social structure of the southern states being perpetuated through the anti-union, union-busting climate. And that's the basis for the 1960s, 1970s Republican Southern strategy, among other things. So the right to work. It's also interesting. There was card check under the original Wagner Act. You could create a union by getting people to sign cards, right? They didn't have to come out in public and be intimidated by the bosses. But that was then abolished by Taft-Hartley, and the card check today, of course, is going nowhere. Other than that, Truman distinguished himself by attacking the New Deal base. There was a huge strike wave in 1946, steel, auto, coal, rail, and elsewhere. And Truman basically made it his job to break these strikes, attacking the people that had won the war, the people who had fought at Normandy and Tarawa and Okinawa. They come back and say, thanks a lot, and now you're going to get gouged. But nevertheless, the labor unions were powerful enough to ram through 1, 2, or 3 rounds of wage increases, including health care paid for by employers. Probably the high point of this is the May 1946 rail strike, where Truman wants to draft everybody, nationalize it, draft them, and make them work. During the war, you had a lot of gains by the unions. Typical is the figure of Sidney Hillman on the Office of Production Management. Office of Production Management, OPM, key part of the logistical mobilization. It was headed by a guy called William Knudsen, who had been the head of General Motors. And these were people who didn't want to increase production because they were afraid that they'd be left with overcapacity at the end of the war. Too bad if Hitler won, but they didn't care about that. They cared about their post-war profits. But you had then Sidney Hillman on the OPM, and the slogan was, clear it with Sidney, because if you wanted to get things done, you had to get the assent of organized labor, and that's essentially the structure that won the war. The reactionaries, General Electric, always the center of reactionaries, greed, avarice, union busting, wage gouging. Lemuel Boulware, Boulware, was the anti-union, rabid anti-union executive of General Electric, and his doctrine was called Bulwerism, translated as union busting. And one of the disciples of Bulwerism was a washed-up B-grade Hollywood actor named Ronald Reagan, who had turned into a real nasty reactionary when he found that he was being taxed, among other things, for the war effort, and became a lifelong union buster. That's Ronald Reagan, who later became president. We'll be back in a minute.